Um, we've got a really good lineup this afternoon. Before we get going, the usual housekeeping. If you're not doing a presentation, please mute your microphone so we don't get all kinds of extraneous background noises. We will be recording the session today, so if you have an aversion to being recorded, just don't talk and nobody will know you're here. We've got a pretty good crowd, and I'm really looking forward to both of our, or all three of our guests today. We've got Kristen Hoving and Emma Powell be talking about Swallow's Saga, and Ann Barry is joining us after the motorcycles go by with primates. And all three of these people I've known for a number of years. I think it was about 5 years ago, we did a show of Swallow's Saga at the center in the old location. And if you saw it, you're already familiar with the imagery from the book. It was a really lovely show, and we were very lucky to get it. So on that note, I'm going to pass it to Kristen and Emma, and we'll hear about Swallow's Saga.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for your support of this project, both today and in form of that exhibition, which was a real honor to be showing at your gallery. I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. What we decided to do was first kind of page through the book and talk about the narrative that we developed through the photographs, a bit about the actual shooting, but more about the storyline that we wanted to convey with the images. After that, we will talk a little bit about work we had been doing prior to this project and how it fed into the project. Emma will talk a little bit about the process of making the prints and some of the post-processing and our ideas for the book itself. So that's our game plan for today. From the beginning of this project, we envisioned it as a book. We wanted to create a book that dealt with environmental issues, but through fantasy rather than factual documentary environmental photography, much of which we found beautiful, but sometimes really depressing and not with the happy ending that our story has. We wanted a story that would have a strong female heroine who realizes that she has the power within herself to enact environmental change. We focused on the issues of species extinction as our issue that we wanted to explore, and in particular bird species extinction. After we finished the project, we actually encountered real news stories about really wholesale bird species extinction. So it was a kind of life imitating art situation that we found a little chilling. The foreword to the book was written by Bill McKibben, who's a noted environmental writer. It's not a real Icelandic saga. We made it up ourselves, but as you'll see, Iceland plays an important part in the story.
So the first chapter is setting the context for our narrative. We decided that we wanted a narrative that was sort of a continuous story from beginning to end. And so we wanted to set the scene here of this character who is sort of a guardian for birds. She has this relationship with birds. And so we use this first chapter to set up her world and the context around it.
We had to figure out a way to convey the idea of species extinction and loss, which is the next chapter. Did I jump in too quick on your heels?
I was just going to add another thing in terms of the title of the book. We chose the character's name to be Swallow, which is an Icelandic name, but it's also the term for a bird, a swallow. similar to a woman's name being Robin, like the bird. Our character is both the name of a bird and an actual Icelandic name.
Which we only discovered when we were halfway through the project. It was one of those chills going up and down the spine moments when we thought, oh, some things are lining up in the cosmos for us. Okay. After we introduce Svala as the guardian of the birds, who realizes, much to her dismay, that the birds are disappearing, and indeed one morning have entirely disappeared. We had to figure out how we were going to convey the idea of loss, environmental loss, which is an important idea for much environmental art and literature. We developed the idea that she would not find what she was looking for, the empty nesting ground, silence. She no longer hears the birds. We realized it's kind of hard to photograph absence as opposed to presence. So we sort of cast around for ways to do this. Throughout the narrative, as you'll see, she wears what we called her traveling cloak. Here we highlight it in the photograph called Talisman, to give continuity to the story and to give us more flexibility when it came to editing parts of the story.
It also stands out really well against the volcanic rock, which is this sort of dark brown color. And so having this light cloak helps her stand out in different contexts across the
We kept having to sew buttons back on it.
Yeah.
Got really worn out by the end.
I think it's a riding cloak from the 1920s.
It's for riding in a Stanley steamer or something like that. I found it at a yard sale. The final picture in the lost section there is Memento Mori. As we were shooting, we kept saying, we need to find dead birds. We have to find dead birds. And in fact, if you'll go back one, Emma, we actually found a beautiful dead loon on a beach on the Gulf of Mexico, actually, in Louisiana. And we'll talk a little bit more about the construction of this photograph later. We called that image Final Heartbeat to get across this idea of loss. Or the next one, which we found arranged this way. We didn't pick up these wings. They were like this on a beach in Iceland. And we called this one Memento Mori.
And there's that volcanic rock beach, that sort of dark color.
Yeah.
The next chapter is Premonitions, where the fantasy starts. She's encountering and engaging with visions and dreams, starting to try to figure out what's going on with the birds and this absence. She casts eggshells to try to predict the future and realizes that this future she's predicting is a really scary one, where her world is in a state of crisis.
And we tried to capture that both through straight photographs, like the one on the left, where she's actually walking through a steam vent in the middle of the landscape in Iceland, or the one on the right that's obviously manipulated so that the ice is actually bursting into flame to sort of encapsulate the idea of climate change and warming.
And one of the interesting things with the way we shot this is a lot of it was on site. And so even if the one on the right might look a little more composited, the scene itself is real. The only thing that was added is the fire. So a lot of the scenes that seem more dramatic and more impossible sometimes are actually real.
As Svala consults oracles and tries to interpret her dreams, she realizes that it's up to her to make a change, to bring the birds back, to set the world back in balance, her world. And so she goes off on a mythic quest in order to bring the birds back to the world. She leaves home. Home had been an important theme in that initial set of pictures in the Guardian chapter. She finds her path. She's pretty intrepid as an explorer. This is actually a straight photograph. Emma was climbing, and Emma's pretty intrepid too. She was climbing the rocks in her little orange boots. I was quite far away. We developed hand signals for go higher, go lower. I was yelling, "Be careful, don't fall." We created images like this one that I think could easily be thought of as digital manipulations, but actually are pretty true to life.
Unlike this one on the left, which I'll explain a little more later, which is about 3 different images shot at different times. This image we actually made in the first trip. We took 2 trips to Iceland. And the second trip was really helpful in that we were able to go back to certain places and reshoot things. So this is one that we actually went back to and redesigned in a way.
So she explores the surface of her world, but she also goes into the underworld, which is a consistent theme in lots of mythic literature. Think about Joseph Campbell and the journey to the underworld. So we had her going into caverns and into the earth itself, as she is in this one on the right. Or this one where she's in a cavern looking out at the light that she sees in front of her.
In the first trip, we really wanted to try to discover for ourselves what this series was going to be. We had a vague idea. In the second trip, we really wanted to have more dramatic scenes and put the character in more danger to really show the full arc of the narrative. And so a lot of the ones in this chapter in particular, where she's tested as a character, a lot of those were taken in this second trip. We also, again, we wanted to address this idea of how do you show something that's not there in the absence of the birds and her relationship there. So we wanted to find ways of referencing birds without necessarily having them visible. So here there's an element of flight and feathers. Or she's almost sort of encased in an egg-like shape where she's frozen.
Excuse me, that one is also a street photograph shot in an ice tunnel on a glacier. She's got crampons, her hiking boots under her traveling cloak. And she got really wet.
And the guide that helped us find this ice tunnel said that this place would be melted in about 2 weeks, and that was several years ago. So here she's sort of hatching out of the ice tunnel. And we also tried to think about what elements are actually endangering bird species and have her encounter some of those dangers. So here she's trapped in a net.
Okay, after she goes through these perils and has to sort of conquer these challenges, she realizes that the only way she's going to solve this problem is to reach inside herself, that she has the power to enact the change that needs to be wrought to bring her world back into balance. And so she gathers strength. And we wanted a series of images about her realizing this and becoming stronger and stronger, turning the tide, finding balance, moving mountains. The image on the left, obviously composited. That log was in Colorado, but that is the glacier that we were hiking on. The one on the right, straight. She's picking up a rock. That's a real glacier behind us, and the wind is blowing her hair. We joked that the series featured Svala, the landscape of Iceland, and Emma's hair, which was always blowing everywhere in all kinds of directions.
It's helpful that Iceland is really windy.
Yeah. She becomes a quite powerful figure.
And sort of emphasizing this fantasy element of the series.
She realizes she has the power over her own destiny and that she can assert herself as an agent of change. And we use the symbols like the key to symbolize this idea of unlocking answers, conquering her problems.
And then the next chapter is rebirth. And so since she's been gathering her strength and connecting to the natural world and her world, she starts to find eggs, which she gathers and protects. What'd you say?
I was just going to point out that there was a little nest with an egg in it on that cliff there. I don't know
It's
how
easier in a big print to see, but there's
a little computer screen. And that's a real one too. She was up there on that cliff and I was really yelling, be careful.
I did have to add the eggs though. We kept a handful of different types of eggs with us as we traveled. Some of them were fake and some were real.
Egg. We had some goose eggs that a friend of mine had blown out that broke and were those shells we later saw, all kinds.
We'd buy chicken eggs at the store and just collecting all the eggs we could find. Just like our characters. So she starts collecting the eggs and protecting them.
And almost taking on the character of a bird with a nest. I love the way the hair is blowing and this one looking almost like feathers.
This was a like volcanic
a caldera,
crater lake. And so this is a trail around the lake that you can see, but it's also egg shaped, which we really appreciated the shapes in a lot of these.
Okay, and the final chapter of the book is called From the Brink. She rescues the birds from the brink of extinction by nurturing them, by heating them, by tending them. She begins to hear bird song instead of silence again. And the birds begin to come back. And she, once again, she's the guardian. She's reunited with them. This, I think, heron or crane on the right was actually shot at Birdland, where we went with Ann Berry and photographed this wonderful bird zoo, sort of. Was fun. There are little gulls in that cliff. And then this is the final image in the series. Oh, okay, there are little gulls there. They're hard to see in the picture, but she's brought them from the brink back to life. And this is the final picture in the series and the cover picture as well. And except for the spyglass and a couple birds, a straight photograph. She's standing on an iceberg. Again, she got really wet. And after Emma printed the photograph and we took a good look at it, we realized the iceberg actually has the shape almost of a Viking boat. And I thought that was pretty serendipitous as well. But it was kind of crazy climbing up on an iceberg, but that's okay. Okay.
How are we on time?
That's 8 minutes, or we have about 8 minutes left, according to my timer.
So we wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to this series and just give you a little sort of snapshot of what led us to this. So the previous work that I've been working on was a series of cyanotypes dealing with fictional narratives that were sort of narratives contained in single images that all connected with sort of a vague connection. And so I really wanted to try to address a narrative that was more of a continuous sort of complete narrative that one image led into the next. And so that was something that I had been thinking about moving forward with the project.
I had been also working with narrative and fiction in a series, a very small series I did of about 10 photographs that I called Queen Justine Finds the Key to Her Dreams. Again, exploring this idea of how do you bring photography, which is an art about realism, really, together with fantasy. I'd also been working on a series called Night Wanderers of old photographs and objects frozen in discs of ice that represent constellations. This is the constellation Como Berenice. I'd also, at the same time, explored another sort of flip side idea, photographing quarries in Vermont in connection with an art historical project I was doing about Edward Burtynsky. This really got me into rock, and rock plays an important part in Svala, as well as the idea of going underground. I was photographing underground quarries in these deep, deep caverns with a hard hat, and really enjoying that sense of being inside the earth.
We took a workshop at Anderson Ranch with the Park Harrisons together. And as part of that week, we went down and shot in this underground grotto cave that had ice in the middle of July. And it was through this sort of mini series that we did, which was essentially part of my In Search of Sleep series. But I had Kirsten, my mother, if you didn't catch that, I had her hold the camera for me while I sort of directed her. But it was through this experience that we decided that we worked well together and we wanted to develop a project that would be a true collaboration.
Yeah, this was a really turning point for us because we realized that working together and developing this kind of storyline could be really fun, and it was.
So we made the plan to go to Iceland. We had a vague idea that we had talked through about wanting our narrative to be fiction, but to also address species extinction in some way. And we had sort of some ideas, but we really used that first 2-week trip to explore the country and explore what our images could be and how we could pull together the narrative. And so these are examples. In the first trip, we took maybe an extra suitcase full of costumes and props and things. And so these are examples of some that didn't make the cut because they were different costumes. We really honed in on the single traveling cloak.
Yeah, it would feel too much like Svala was always making clothing changes, and where does she have this huge wardrobe coming from? That wasn't going to work, but it took us some experimenting with that to come to that conclusion and to realize that different costumes would really tie up the narrative in a way that we didn't want.
We wanted to make sure that the landscape of Iceland was essentially a character in the series. And so we explored different places like this ice cave we talked about. But Iceland is also a popular tourist destination, so sometimes we had to avoid getting tourists in the shot and things like that.
People would often think Emma was a reenactor, and Icelandic people would come up and talk to her in Icelandic, and we would just look dumb and say, "Well,"
or they'd ask to have American tourists would ask to have their picture taken.
Yeah.
But most of the time we were able to shoot on our own, and we basically spent all day shooting and then the evenings editing the images as we went, sort of figuring out what we needed for the narrative. Here's an example of this image that's the sort of end of the series, but here you can see these are actually they're these big icebergs that were the calving face of a glacier. It goes into this lagoon called the Iceberg Lagoon. And the day before, this beach had been completely empty, and then there was a lot of wind that night, and we went back in the morning just to see, and there were these huge pieces of ice that had washed up on shore. So I'm actually climbing a little bit onto one of these pieces of ice, and as I did that, as soon as we got the image, a big wave came in and I got kind of soaked. I did want to just talk a little bit about some of the editing. So like we said, some of the images like that one are pretty straightforward, whereas some of them are highly manipulated. So the one on top here, you can see there's at least 3 different shots. These are actually the same situation, but I moved the figure up higher. Because they were shot in the same place with the same lighting, it's easier to move the figure without it looking out of place. And then the little thing at the top I shot in Greece many years ago. And then this bird that I'm holding here, the image on its own may seem like one of the least manipulated, but it's actually one of the most because I never touched the bird because it was gross, covered in insects and so forth. And so we just shot the figure, me as the figure, in the same lighting condition in a way that would look like I was holding the bird. So it takes a little bit of forethought and planning and kind of visualization of what the final image might be. So we had talked about different ways of producing the final image, and I landed on this process that I actually learned from Dan Burkholder, which was to coat palladium chemistry on top of digital color underprint. So I start with the unedited image, and then I convert that to a digital negative and print it out the full size of the final image that I want to print. Then I print out just the color layer onto an uncoated paper, essentially like a watercolor paper, and then I paint and coat the palladium chemistry directly on top of that. and use the digital negative to contact print the image to get the final image. So what's happening here is a palladium print, which is essentially what this would look like on the left, is produced on top of a layer of digital color to produce the final image.
We wanted something that felt sort of nostalgic and old-fashioned rather than the feel of a modern, just push print, digital print.
We also wanted it to feel like an illustration and relate to that, but we didn't want it to be a process that was really easy to identify in terms of a very specific time period. We wanted to be more open.
And timeless, yeah.
And timeless. Yeah. And so once we had the exhibition prints ready, we wanted to get them out into the world. And so we showed them in several places, such as the Southeast Center for Photography. Thank you, Michael. It was really great in that show in particular to be able to show essentially the whole series and have it all together. We also showed them with the Tribe exhibition in the Fox Talbot Museum and the Center for Photographic Art. This was curated by Lori Verba, and Anne Barry was a big part of it as well. You can see her image on the left, on the right image. I've also shown it in the Walker Fine Art Gallery in Denver, as well as Lionheart Gallery. Oops, I don't know why that flips. Okay. And so here's the book. We have been self-publishing, and we're selling it along with an 8x10 print. Because it is a continuous narrative, we always had the idea that this series would really work as a book and as a final production, and so we were really eager to see how it would sequence and see what it would be like as a book. So we have been self-publishing it and putting it out on our own.
It's available on powerphoto.bigcartel.com. That's where you can find it and maybe purchase it
if you'd like. So thank you very much for listening to our talk. And I hope we can answer any questions that you have.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirsten and Emma.
Thank you.
It's good to see those images again. Anybody out there have some questions?
I don't have a question. I have a comment, however.
Okay, Erwin.
Even without the driving story, the images themselves are just incredibly well done. I can be awfully harsh, and I'm just absolutely blown away by the quality, by the concept. Just such wonderful work. My hat is off to you both.
Thank you
very much. It was about 4 years in the making, from the first shots to finally taking and printing the last ones, and then the book has been more than that.
They're just stunning.
Thank you.
I have a question. I just want to say it's completely spellbinding. They're just beautiful. I noticed that there was a big chunk of text at the beginning, not a big chunk, but a small paragraph. What was the thinking behind sort of not continuing that throughout, like at the beginning of each section, or, it kind of makes sense that you wouldn't do it storybook-like with a sentence underneath each photo at the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something we spent a long time pulling our hair out about. We had long captions, we had little paragraphs for each chapter opening, and it kept getting edited and edited more and more. And finally, we decided we wanted the images and just the titles to carry the story, with those chapter 1-word or 2-word chapter divisions to sort of show transitions from one small group of photos to the next. The opening little paragraph simply says, Svala was the guardian of the birds. One day she woke up, she couldn't hear them anymore. She didn't know what happened. And finally she realized, after she consulted her dreams and oracles, that it was up to her to save them, and off she goes. And that's basically all that little paragraph said. That was edited down from maybe 2 or 3 pages that we originally had as an introduction.
Thank you.
I also just think that is, your work is a wonderful treat for the imagination, and it's such seamless integration with the Icelandic environment. And I applaud you for finding a way to show a cause that does create kind of a literary narrative with the visual process. Just beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was really important to us to have it still be somewhat positive, because so many environmental projects are so grim that we wanted there to be this fantasy and magic to it as well.
And the sense that one person could make a difference, one person could really bring about change. That was a really important storyline that we wanted to have hit home.
I have two quick questions. Hello?
Sure.
Did you storyboard this at all, or script it out initially?
It wasn't scripted out. I think the first trip was a lot looser in terms of kind of trying to figure out what the narrative would be. And then after that first trip, the trips were a year or two apart. And so after that first trip, we started really pulling the narrative together and looking at a sequencing of the images and figuring out where things were missing. And so in the second trip, we were able to really pinpoint the types of images we were looking for and what we needed to really fill out the narrative.
By the second trip, I think we pretty much knew those chapter divisions, or at least the main themes that we were exploring. And for some, we only had 1 or 2 photographs. For others, we had 20 or 30. And we went back the second time really consciously thinking, okay, we need more of this. We've already got this covered. Let's concentrate on this.
So would you say that you covered everything that you that you decided you wanted to cover, or did you miss anything and that would require a third trip?
Oh, I'd love to go again.
I mean, it's something that I think we could have kept doing for a really long time, but we did want to be able to sequence it as a book and to see how it would come together. So there was a point where we had to sort of stop to some degree. But I could see going back and continuing it down the road.
How many copies of the book did you make? Or is
We're printing them on demand. So right now we have a small number of them, but we can have more printed.
We didn't want to have a garage full of boxes of books that we had to worry about getting moldy or whatever. So the idea of printing on demand really appealed to us.
But we're open to the idea of printing it a different way down the road. But this was just something we wanted to take control of ourselves.
If a publisher approached you, you might not say no, right?
Yeah.
Good. Very nice.
So I have a question, a couple questions actually. First of all, on the printing on demand, what do you use for that?
We used Blurb.
Okay, that's good.
We looked at a couple different ones, but we used Blurb in the end.
Right. And then I've been to Iceland only once, and but the saga is really important in Icelandic culture and tradition.
Yeah.
So why did you decide on Iceland, and why did you know about the saga before? And I think maybe the last question is, did you have guides? How did you find the places you wanted to photograph? Because it's an amazing country, actually.
We only had the one guide on for the when we went up onto the glacier and into the ice caves.
Okay.
But one of the tricks we did was if we were driving around and we saw a large amount of cars and things, we would pull over because we knew there was something there to see. But we also used guidebooks. We did the whole ring road in the first trip, and then we did the southern coast in the second trip.
Okay, yeah.
Why Iceland? I had wanted to go to Iceland. I was turning 60 at one point, 9 years ago. And I decided for my 60th birthday, I wanted to go to Iceland. That didn't happen, but the next year I said to Emma, hey, you want to go to Iceland? And she said, sure. So we went. By that point, we had already done that shoot in the ice cave in Colorado, and we knew we wanted to do a collaborative project. So we said, let's bring this together. Let's do a collaborative project in Iceland. Yes, I knew the tradition of the sagas and the Eddas. But ours is our own. We invented it. It's not a real Icelandic saga, which sometimes people ask us. We have shown it to some people from Iceland and they are into it, but it's our own story.
I think another kind of reference or thing that influenced us was Tolkien, because she used to read me all of the Tolkien books when I was a kid. So there were certain places in Iceland where we're like, oh, there's probably an orc around there. And, you know, the landscape is so dramatic and really evocative of those types of narratives. But we also wanted to create a mythic quest with a female protagonist, which you don't see in Tolkien and some of those other narratives.
The Tolkien, the hobbits and the elves, I think it is in Iceland. A lot of similarity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have you continued working together as collaborators?
I'm living in Colorado and Kirsten's in South Carolina right now. So we haven't collaborated on anything since this project, but we still talk about this project and you know the ways that we're putting it out into the world. And if you didn't catch, I'm Kirsten's daughter.
Yes.
So we are still in touch and we'll definitely like work on things in the future together.
Yeah,
But we don't have plans for any specific projects.
It's hard with COVID because we haven't seen each other in over a year, but
yeah,
hopefully we can get back and maybe do some sort of collaboration in Colorado or New Mexico. Or Charleston.
Or Charleston.
You have a lot of outtakes from this photo shoot?
Hundreds, thousands, yeah. We would basically, we're not very good at being traditional tourists. So this was also a way for us to engage with a landscape and a place and have something to do. So we would basically spend all day shooting and driving and finding new sites to engage with. And then, like I said, we'd spend the evenings editing and kind of figuring out just from the day's shoot what images really stood out. And so we did have a lot of outtakes and things that we didn't end up using.
And some days we could go back the next day and reshoot something if we thought, oh, there's potential here, but it really didn't work. So it was a really good working process, I think.
We thought about taking a tour with on a bus or something like that, but we decided it was really important for us to rent a car and have control and be able to stay somewhere if we found it really powerful, or move on and have that control ourselves.
Great story. Thanks. Thanks for sharing.
So you were there not in the wintertime, obviously.
Both times were in the summer, which is actually nice because the lighting's fairly consistent and it stays light all night. And so we had that ability to keep shooting as late as we needed to.
The first time I think we went in July, and then we went back the second time in May. And the landscape was really different between just 2 months based on how light that the plants were getting.
When you go in the winter, the environment changes. I mean, overnight.
Oh, wow.
I was there in the wintertime and we'd be in whiteout conditions, and an hour later it'd be sun out.
No, I really want to go in the winter.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're excited to hear Anne.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous book. So.
Thank you.
There's a leader.
Want me to start?
And I think we may have lost Michael, Anne.
Oh, okay.
So I would say, yeah, go ahead and get started.
Can I share my screen?
Okay, I hope Michael's back. I just thank you, Michael, for having me. And I was excited to be doing this with Kirsten and Emma because I love them and I love the book. I have the book and I love that project and I've seen it exhibited in real life and it's beautiful. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of an introduction to my work. That's my first camera that my grandfather gave me, and I studied photography in college, and I'm from Atlanta, so I also took classes in the summer at Atlanta College of Art, which ended up being absorbed into SCAD. Another thing that kind of contributes to my work is I've always loved animals, and that's me. When I was little, I used to catch the ducks from the duck pond where people would leave their Easter ducks and bring them home. And I grew up riding horses, and horses were always a big part of my life. And that's why I went to Sweetbriar at college too, training horses. So I've always, and I quit doing that when I got married just because of the logistics of it. So I kind of had that yearning to be close to animals that I'd been fulfilled by being around horses when I was younger. So I skipped forward lots of years and I was able to travel with my husband who travels for business. And I took these pictures in Paris. I went to the little zoo in the center of Paris because we'd been there a while. I like to go to this. I'd already been to Père Lachaise and the other cemeteries, and I'd been to all the exhibitions. And so I went to this little zoo, and there was something about these photographs that I loved. So I started, when I traveled, kind of targeting going to the zoo. And this is a map of showing the places, at least in Europe where I went. And you see they're concentrated in Germany and the Netherlands. But for one thing, because every other year I would go to this wire show with my husband in Dusseldorf, and I could get on the train very easily and go to other little towns in Germany. And another thing is that Germany and the Netherlands have a whole lot of really small zoos in a concentrated area. And I was going to these zoos where I could be maybe the only person in the monkey house, or it wouldn't be like in America where it's very crowded. And so I wouldn't have to worry about getting someone else's reflection in the glass. And also the animals would be relating to me. And another kind of interesting thing is I don't speak German or Dutch. And so I wouldn't really be talking to people on the train or even all day. So I think it kind of set me up for being able to maybe communicate silently. And this is an example of that, is that this chimpanzee lived in Krefeld, Germany, in this very small zoo. And one day there was a lady that was sketching and she spoke English, and she told me she wanted me to meet her friend, the chimpanzee. And we went over to the window, and he came immediately running over there, and she told him I was going to take his picture, and I had my camera, and he ran and got that screw out of a hiding place. And she ran off saying he shouldn't have that metal object. And he sat there and posed for me. And when I put my camera down, he went and hid the screw. If he was going to be picture taken, it was going to be with his little special object. So this is a real short slideshow of the images in this project.
If you needed me, I would come. to ease your pain. Ladies with me now, since I showed her how to lay her lily hands in mine, and who would not agree? She's a sight to see, and the treasure for the poor to find. If I needed, would you come to me? Would you come to me for to ease my pain? And if you needed me, I will come to you. I will swim the seas for to ease your pain.
Okay. This slide shows the equipment that I used to take these pictures. I took them all with a Nikon full frame DSL, and I've used this vintage girl size lens, usually the 80 millimeter, with that's the adapter lets me tilt the plane of focus about 9 degrees. I did it all natural light. Most of these monkey houses have a skylight, so it's nice filtered light. And I didn't have any special access to the zoo. I just tried to go during the week and get there right when it opened and stayed. You can see the tilt, the effect of this in this picture of that tilt lens, but I tried to tilt the lens so that it makes the viewer's eye go right up to the primate's eye. And this image also shows another kind of the connection of the primates. This little monkey was playing with it. The window came all the way down to the ground, and the monkey was playing with a child, a very young child. And this, the sort of the pictorial element, it was intentional. And I think this, to make this where I can read it, I can't see this slide. Oop. Trying to make my list of people go away so I can read that. But so you can, I think this explains it better than I can, but I can't read it to you because my little, you can read it yourself. My little, can't get the pictures of you, of the participants out of the way. But I think it's interesting that we were talking in Kirsten and Emma's book about the feeling of loss, and the pictorial imagery does that a little bit. And he talks about this, that, you know, how it contributes to that feeling of loss, that we're losing these primates just like we're losing the birds. So then I made this small book with Bill Schwab, who has Northlight Press, in 2014, and it's just a little teeny edition of 100, and it's just it's called 11+1. It only has 11 pictures in it, and then it has a little tiny photogravure. And then in 2015 at Photonola, I met Stephen Hall Bahari and from 21st Editions, and we started working on this project. That was winter of 2015, December of 2015, and it came out in 2017, so a little bit over a year. And it's like a library edition. You know, it's not a book that just anyone can buy, and they only made 17 of them. When you work with 21st Editions, their subtitle is The Art of the Book, and they are going to have, you sign a contract that they have all the control over the editing and the design of the book, and just all the elements of the book. And he would even always tell me what they were doing. I didn't even know what color the book was till they got ready to tell me. So you can see how many artists worked on this book. All the letterpress and the paper and the binding is all done by people and the platinum prints that, contributed along. So it's my art plus the art of the book plus 21st edition sees themselves as part of the process, as the book being their art. So the text, they also chose the text, and the editor, Collier Brown, this is what he says about why they chose this particular text, which is from Darwin's Expressions of Emotions in Man and Animals. Barry's photographs follow in Darwin's spirit. Her apes are shy, ardent, sad, serious, inquisitive, and thoughtful. Darwin's text and Barry's photography are an essential pairing. They inspire a humanity more worthy of the animals. So that's the clamshell on the left that the project is housed in, and then the lighter green is the bound print, the book itself. And then the book has 11 prints in it, and then the thing behind the book has 8 loose platinum prints. And the prints in the book are platinum as well. And then it has these 2 photogravures that are housed. They've put in a little case, the 2 7-inch photogravures. So here's some other places that have written about the work, and just a couple of the exhibitions that I was excited to be included in. It's actually in that Italian newspaper today, or it either came out yesterday or today. And my nephew lives in Rome, and he went and got one. It's their magazine edition, their weekly magazine, and sent me he texted me a snapshot of it. But then it came out in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago. But these are some other, people that have written about it. And it's a completed project, and I've moved on to other things, but I keep on thinking this work is important because I see how it causes people to have empathy that draws a response. So I'm trying to partner with nonprofits to broaden their advocacy. And the things I like to help sanctuaries and zoos that are trying to take better care of their animals, and also help animals with their natural habitats, which are slowly shrinking to nothing. So here's one example of what I've done that I'm working on right now with it in Basel, the Primate Initiative, and they are just trying to have a certain kind of rights for primates so that they can, if a zoo or a individual person or whatever is not taking care of them, they can help facilitate that they get better taken care of. Then I'm also working in Georgia with Project Chimps, who is a sanctuary for chimpanzees retired from research. And just, they need money and space because they keep getting more and more of these chimpanzees. And it's a really beautiful space in North Georgia. They're allowed to go outdoors, and they live in little communities. And so I'm going to go take pictures of them, and I let just like with the previous example, I license them either to use my pictures or pictures I take for them, and I don't charge them for it. And then I'm also I'm doing a book that's more accessible, that they can use the book along with a print of one of their animals to raise for some fundraising. So the book that I've been working on for almost a year now, and it should come out in the summer, is I'm working with Laurie Schock, who's a book designer in Atlanta, and it's going to have 472 standard books. It's got, it's a hardbound book, Smithsonian, with 49 plates in it. And then I'll have a special edition that has 2 photogravures that I'll pull at home. And the special edition is going to have a slipcase, and it'll have, I'm making a little hand bound booklet that will hold the two photogravures. So it's available for if people are emailing me or on my website. And if people that are pre-ordering it at this early date, I don't know when I will quit doing this, but I'm offering a choice of the print from my series. Just 6x6 would come with it when it comes out. So that is it.
How big is the book to be?
It's 9 inches by 9 inches.
Okay. Did you get any copies of the 21st?
I did. The way that they work is they made they made 17 to
Right.
sell, and I got 2 of them. And I have in my contract that I have to give them first refusal if of buying it if I want to sell it, and I can't advertise. It's funny because I can't advertise online and cut their price, but then their price, they don't advertise their price. So that's a little bit ambiguous. But they mainly sell them to libraries, and they've sold the whole collection to the National Gallery of Art Special Collection.
What did it sell for?
Close to $20,000.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. Yeah, okay, thank you.
I've seen 21st editions for a number of years at Photo LA, and their books are absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've never seen books printed and just as gorgeous as they are. So,
yeah,
but of course, the price is also fantastic. So
I wouldn't even be able to own my own book if they hadn't given me.
Yeah, right.
So your book, that special edition, that's a $60 book, is that right?
Well, no, the regular edition is
The regular edition. Okay. What's the special edition then?
I think well, it's not coming out till this summer, so you can't hold me to this, but it'll probably be $275.
Okay.
$275. But I have set the price for the regular edition because I've already sold a few.
Where can you go to get the regular edition?
My email address is on my website, and there's also the book. There's some information about the book on my website, and you can email me.
What's your website?
It's AnnBerryStudio.com.
Okay.
Can you buy any of your prints from your images?
Any of my prints?
Can I buy any of the images as a print?
Yes, I do sell the prints, and I have 2 sizes, 10 inch by 10 inch or 15 inch by 15 inch, and they're silver gelatin prints, and they're limited to, both of those are editions of 10. So 2 editions of 10.
Did you often have the camera against the glass? I see sometimes you didn't.
Yes, sometimes I use the reflection like that, but I did often have the camera right against the glass.
Because you don't have a lot of glare coming off the glass. And that's
Well, part of that is because I was manually focusing, so I could sort of focus through the glass.
Yeah.
But then I used it when I liked the way the reflection was doing, or the glare, or even the dirt on the glass.
Right.
Sometimes I had no control of that, but sometimes I liked the way it looked.
How long did the animals pose for you generally? 1 shot? Did you have 10 shots, 20 shots? And did you talk to them?
Yes, I did. But so I guess in the cases of the chimpanzees, much longer, because they're more engaged with you, and maybe even the gorillas. But the small monkeys are very active and hard to catch.
Yeah. So, okay.
But like that chimpanzee that was sitting there holding his screw, he would have sat there even longer. He sat there as long as I wanted him to.
But that's unusual, right?
It is, except for chimpanzees will sit still,
Yeah.
and they'll sit at the window and look at you.
Are the last question, I'm sorry, the zoo's still there, do you think?
So that little zoo in Krefeld, Germany, I don't know if any of y'all heard about this, but it's really a sad ending. But on New Year's Eve, well, New Year's Day, 2020, it's in a little bitty town, and some people were letting off Chinese lanterns for New Year's, and one of them landed on the top of that primate house, and it burned down. And that I think a couple of the chimpanzees survived, but none of the ones. I have 2 chimpanzees in my series out of there, and 3 gorillas, and they all died. So that was very sad. There were only 3 gorillas, and the 3 gorillas in that zoo and that chimpanzee had been captured in the wild over 40 years ago. But then the zoo, that you would never do that now, and you would never keep them in that kind of environment now, but they're still tasked with taking care of them for the rest of their lives. They weren't breeding them.
Okay, thank you.
Did you use a shift or tilt lens, you said?
I did. I have so it's a medium format lens on a 35 millimeter camera, and the adapter that they made for it, and it's it was for a Russian medium format, and the Russians made the adapter. They let it has room to tilt and still cover the whole area that a 35 millimeter would.
Oh, great pictures, great images.
Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. Sorry, I disappeared there.
Yeah, where were you?
Anybody else have anything for Ann?
That's great.
On our website, on the Book Talk page, there are links to all the books we've talked about today. So we can always go back there, or whatever, at your convenience, you can go and click onto the websites to get either. If you want to get the 21st edition book, I'm sure they'll sell you one.
Sure.
And we'll put a link on there for the new book from Ann. But other than that, I guess we'll wrap it up for today. Next month, on the 20th again, we have Peanut Press for the entire hour talking about their 10 new books they just came out with. So hopefully you can join us then. Otherwise, enjoy the weekend, and we'll catch you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so very much.
Bye.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks,
Michael.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Take care all.